There are no sponsors. The people who keep it going are those of us who watch it. It means taking a little money out of our pockets, but it's a small price to pay, really.
On Sunday, the Iraqi cabinet voted 27-1 to approve the latest U.S. draft of the Status of Forces Agreement. The agreement, which will see U.S. forces remain in Iraq until the end of 2011, will now be voted on by the Iraqi parliament. In part 3 of our interview with Sabah al-Nasseri, Sabah gives us reason to believe that the landslide victory inside the cabinet may not be representative of the broader Iraqi population, and he evaluates the evolving power dynamics inside Iraq.
Welcome back to the next segment of our interview with Sabah al-Nasseri, a professor of political science at York University and an expert on Middle East politics. Welcome again. Welcome. So, to quote Chairman Mao Zedong, political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. And if that's true, who in Iraq's got guns and who are they pointing them at?
So many people in Iraq have guns and pointing at each other. The United States, they have their own paramilitary group, the militia, pointing at the Iraqi government. The Iraqi government, all of them, they have their own militias, the Kurds, the al-Hakim, al-Malikis, pointing them against their opponent within Iraq, like al-Sadr movement, etc. So everybody has guns in Iraq and pointing at each other.
And maybe I should just add, I'm sure everyone knows, but just to remind them, there is gazillions of dollars of oil under the ground. So there's a lot to be fighting for.
Exactly. And especially when we talk about the provincial election in January 31st next year, because according to the constitution, those provinces will have enormous jurisdiction over economic and security issues when it comes to military bases, oil, and so on. So it's a big issue. The second issue...
So just to be clear on this, so the election is coming up, it's January...
31st.
January 31st.
2009, exactly.
These provinces are not like, they have more rights and more power than a state does within the United States or even a province does in Canada.
Exactly.
They can determine oil deals,
exactly.
They can military base deals.
Exactly.
So
they have a lot of justification.
Big issue of who's going to have power in Iraq.
And that was created by the United States right from the beginning in the constitution, actually as a means to weaken the central government, strengthening all these provinces. They had at that time the Kurds in mind as their allies, but now all other provinces trying to take advantage of the constitutions by claiming those economic and security powers and so on. So it's a huge issue for the Iraqi government, the next election. That's why they couple the election to these agreements. But to go back to the issue of the arms and violence and so on, as I said, I mean, the U.S., they have their own militias. They can destabilize the government.
So these are some of these what have been called awakening councils amongst the Sunnis. Do they also have any amongst the Shia, or it's mostly Sunni militias that the Americans have some influence?
Well, I have always my problem with these Sunni and Shias because, you know, the problem is all these provinces are mixed up. So you cannot say that's really, even most of them are so-called tribal forces, but each Iraqi tribe has Shiite and Sunni within it. So this distinction is problematic, but you're right, they have some paramilitary group and militias within some provinces in Iraq, like in Al-Anbar, especially in southwest west of Baghdad. There they have their paramilitary group, not in the south, because in the south is controlled by al-Sadr, al-Fadila, other movement and political parties, right? But there, especially around Baghdad, like a strategic belt, or you can call it security belt for the United States around Baghdad, they created this paramilitary group and militias. And they can use them, but you're right, they cannot control them at the same time, because most of these people are, at the same time are nationalists. So one day will say, hey, we're fed up with all these U.S. tactics and all these issues. And once they realize that the U.S. in their foreign policy never have friends, but only allies for time.
We started talking about this in the last segment, but you hear this often, which is, if Americans leave too soon, if they leave at all, there's going to be a civil war and a bloodbath, and how can we leave Iraq in this situation?
I argued, last year when I was here, that actually we have not a civil war, we have war and terror because of the occupation. So once you end the occupation, actually you will have a pacified situation. Doesn't mean you will have peace overnight. But the Iraqis are capable of controlling the situation, especially...
And most Iraqis want an end to the occupation, so you would think they would be the first ones to know.
Exactly. Look what's happening, not only since the last year, but especially since the discussion around this agreement became public in Iraq. You have, for the first time now, probably since decades, not only since 2003, religious institution, a representative of the Sunni religious institutions going to Najaf and Karbala, meeting with the Sistani, issuing statement together against the agreement and so on.
These are joint, so in other words, joint Shia Sunni religious leaders.
Exactly. So you have development within Iraq.
And Sadr himself has always reached out to Sunnis as creating a broad opposition. Yeah.
So this kind of issues actually brought back all these different Iraqi communities together vis-a-vis the United States. And this actually strengthened the position of al-Maliki government vis-a-vis the United States.
But talk about this bombing. There's a bombing just, I think it was yesterday, the day before.
Yes, yes.
So what does that represent? You know, we've in the past have associated bombings where civilians get killed with al-Qaeda type forces, which is just trying to create a kind of chaos. Does that al-Qaeda type force are they still active? And is that the kind of bombing that just took place?
No, I think it's a nationalist attack, because if you look at this attack, where they took place, against whom, you will see they have a military aims, not civilian one. Of course, you'll have civil casualties all the time. But
the target was military.
Exactly, military. U.S. soldiers, Iraqi soldiers.
U.S. or Iraqi soldiers?
U.S. soldiers and Iraqi soldiers. So they have a strategic military aims, not civilian one.
And what would be the objective of that attack, and who might be behind it?
Many things. The first one, they want to show that despite all the so-called success of search and cantonizing Baghdad or Pantostaning Baghdad in different neighborhoods through these walls didn't work actually. You still can operate within Baghdad and attack all these strategic military posts, etc. The second is as a message against any kind of agreement, security agreement with the United States, because this will...
But who might that be? I mean, the Sadr, if I understand it correctly, agreed not to pick up arms during this stage of things and told his followers not to be fighting this way. So who else is there, and who might be behind these kind of
secular
attacks?
nationals, I would say. Secular nationals. I mean, they are saying, and this is one of these problematic issues in this document, against which not only...
This is the SOFA document.
Exactly, the SOFA documents, a lot of nationals within the parliament, like Allawi, the ex-Ba'athist, Ayad Allawi and his groups. You have a statement within this agreement saying that the United States would support the Iraqi government in its fight against terror and against al-Qaeda, but also against ex-member of the regime, the Ba'athists and so on. The old regime, the Ba'athist regime, was not only all of them pro-Saddam. You have people against Saddam, but they still are Ba'athist, you see? And against such statements, you have these secular nationalists within the parliament and outside by saying not all the Ba'athists were fascists, not all of them were against Saddam, not all of them were Saddamists. So you have secular nationalists attacking also the U.S. and the Iraqi armies and signalizing they are against any kind of security agreement with the United States.
And do they want an end of occupation immediately? Is that the objective of these kinds of attacks?
Not only the end of the occupation, but because if the Iraqi government signed this agreement with the United States, those kind of resistance would be declared as terrorists according to this agreement. So the
But aren't they already?
No, but the thing is that you have a legal now cover within Iraq to kill anybody to Iraq.
So in other words, any armed resistance against U.S. forces is now illegal in terrorism by and in theory would have the Iraqi parliament sign on to such a thing.
Exactly. So criminalizing all kind of resistance and so on by declaring them as being terrorists and a member of the ex-regime or a Saddamist or whatever.
So another reason why this can't pass parliament.
Exactly. Another reason why the seculars and the nationalists and the ex-Ba'athists within the parliament against it and pushing al-Maliki not to sign such agreements in which all these kind of
in the next segment of our interview, let's discuss if it isn't civil war that American forces are stopping, then just what are they there for and who are they supporting? Join us with Sabah al-Nasseri.
Donate today and receive a new documentary film available to members of the Real News Network. The History of the National Security State with legendary author Gore Vidal. Bonus features of the DVD include an in-depth response to Vidal from ex-CIA analyst Ray McGovern, who served under 7 U.S. presidents, an exclusive interview with Colin Powell's former Chief of Staff Larry Wilkerson, and an insightful interview with oil policy analyst Antonia Juhas.
The news magazine of the screen. Living glimpses of history in the making.
Hollywood and Washington, there's a symbiotic relationship. They both deal with illusions. Reality doesn't often play much of a part. I think I saw through the myth of the Cold War almost from the beginning. I was a Washington political kid from a political family. Roosevelt first had radio because he had a this great speaking voice, and everyone liked to hear. Truman proceeded to break every arrangement that Roosevelt had set up for a peaceful coexistence. And Truman thought that it would be a good idea. Why not just stay armed all the time? And then he devised the national security state. You've got to go up and swear allegiance to the United States or else you're a commie. I mean, we had imported fascism. We get Dwight Eisenhower, who said that we have this great military industrial complex. It is a dangerous thing. And he said this is going to change everything. And the way our country's governed is going to change us politically. Along comes Jack Kennedy, who wanted to make his mark, believed in the Cold War. But he said, in this kind of politics, it is the appearance of things that matters. I think everybody should take a sober look at the world about us. The national security state still exists, only it isn't communism anymore, it's terrorism. This is the most serious thing that has happened in the history of the United States. Knowledge is power. We need an honest news system.
We need the real news.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the powers in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Make a tax-deductible donation now of at least $10 a month or a one-time give of at least $75. As a thank you for your support, we will send you the new documentary film, The History of the National Security State.